welcome everyone to the first edition of the Colin Windecker Podcast, brought to you by 1660 The Fan. Joined here today by two fellow Western Michigan sports writers. We have Brandon Fitzsimons. You love me, don't you? You are just gonna.
Don't worry, you made the same mistake that even the T-ball announcer made. And, I had to look up at him, tell him my name.
Hey,
you're not the first.
Good. Well, you know what? We're gonna have a lot of firsts today. But we have Brandon Fitzsimons from Hustle Belt, and I also got here Brian Persky from the Bronco Blitz. I got those both right.
Got it.
All right, got them both right. Money.
Buckets.
Austin Ritchie.
Yeah, Austin Ritchie last night. But we're gonna talk a little bit about Austin Ritchie and those Western Michigan Broncos, and just the incredible performance they put on last night against Toledo Rockets. All three of us were there, sitting courtside watching the game. And guys, I mean, we talked about it before the game. We all thought the Broncos were going to lose, and when I told you guys the spread was 4, you're like, oh, Toledo's going to cover that. But no, Broncos came out with an 11-point victory, fueled by a huge first half that saw them with a 22-point lead about a little over halfway through the half. Austin Ritchie, as we said, 17 points in the first half, eclipsed his season high in the first half. Guys, what did you guys see in that game that you really didn't expect? Because none of us expected any score like that.
Hashtag Austin Buckets Ritchie. That's my opening statement there. But yeah, I mean, Austin Ritchie was kind of stealing the show. I know Brandon's got another guy he's going to highlight. But Austin Ritchie, for me, was a huge surprise, and that was obviously key, with David Brown having, 0 points. So that was pretty awesome right there. But you just got to give it to, I think a lot of the credit goes to Coach Hawkins and just getting them in the right mental state to come out and take on a Toledo team that almost seemed unbeatable in that play.
You touched on Ritchie, but I really like Connor Tavey coming out. I think he had 8 of the first 10 points from the Broncos. He helped key that 30-9 run when the score was 6-5. Took a charge, grabbed a couple of key defensive rebounds, and he finished with a game-high 25 points. So
career high, too.
Career high. So he really was my spark, just doing everything on the floor, playing a little bit of big man. When Shane Whittington was on the bench with foul trouble, he was just an all-around player last night. Just like to see him a little bit better from the free throw line, but hard to take away from 25 points.
Yeah, and you touched on it right there, and Coach Hawkins did stress at the press conference about his team's continued struggles at the free throw line. And, fortunately at the end of the game, they got some key free throws from Ritchie and from Brown to kind of secure that victory. But what does it say about the team where your top scorers, Shane Whittington and David Brown, I think combined for, 22 points yesterday, and the team still scored 86. Just the balance of this team, and it seems like if either one of those guys aren't stepping up, there's somebody else that does.
That's the most surprising thing for me is if you were to tell me blindly that the Broncos would have a 22-point lead in the first half, my immediate reaction was, okay, DB just went off and he had a crazy first half. But to sit there and say they had 0 points, 1 rebound, Shane had 2 fouls and basically was a non-factor. I mean, maybe the team is deeper than we realized. I still think there's some issues on the bench there. But obviously Connor Tavey and Austin Ritchie stepped up, and then a couple of key guys off the bench. And wow, a 22-point lead without your 2 best players is quite a statement.
And you got to credit the defense completely, holding Toledo's offense under 10 points below their average, and then 33 points in the first half, just able to spark that run, force a lot of turnovers, force a lot of bad shots. I think Toledo at one point was shooting 22% from the field, if that. So just to be able to force those turnovers, get Toledo out of the rhythm, get down, get good looks at the basket, nice underneath, drive, and then Ritchie's going off on threes. That's just really what I like to see.
Yeah, and like you said, you got to remember, this is a Toledo team, 12-1 entering the game. Their only loss was to Kansas, and they played Kansas tough, picked by almost every single expert to finish first in the MAC West. And Western came out there, and they were like, okay, so what? They just came out there, played their game, and I would say that's one of the most impressive victories I've seen since I've been covering the team for a couple of years now. I think it's probably one of the most impressive wins I've seen.
And can we talk about that awkward post-game press conference? Was it just me, or was that super awkward with the Toledo beat writer going back and forth with the Coach Kowalczyk about his halftime speech? It seemed like Kowalczyk really laid into the players on halftime, but there was sort of this unwritten awkwardness. That's at least how I thought. I don't know if you guys thought it too. It was uncomfortable.
It's always kind of uncomfortable after a loss to have a beat writer approach and ask about, especially a hothead like Kowalczyk.
Yeah,
just about anything along those lines. It's tough to get a good quote.
And he did not seem happy at all. No. He was so ready to get back on that bus and head back to Toledo. I mean, I'm sure they probably had a nice drive, with the snow and everything. Just looking at this team right now, I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but who so far, in your guys' opinion, has been the biggest surprise? And we're 13 games into the season now. Who's been the biggest surprise so far on this Bronco basketball team?
This is going to sound really weird, and you guys are going to think I'm an idiot, but
We
honestly,
already think that.
I know. This doesn't change much, but honestly, David Brown might be one of my biggest surprises. I sort of pegged him preseason to be, second team All-MAC, and if he did really well, possibility for first team All-MAC, but right now, he's got to be almost a lock to be a first team All-MAC if he keeps up what he's doing. He was great off the bench, and we know what he's capable of earlier in his career, but I did not expect him to average 19, 20 points coming into MAC play. So to me, a little bit of a surprise to me that he's doing so well. But, obviously David Brown is David Brown, but that's my surprise.
My surprise is going to be Connor Tavey. I know I might be coming back to him, but he started on the team with points at 12.9. He's second on the team in rebounds with 5.4, and he's shooting the ball best on the team at 62%. He's also dishing out the most assists on the team, so he's doing it all from a nice small forward, power forward spot, and he's playing the big man if he needs to when Shane Whittington is on the bench with foul trouble, which might be the only glaring hole in this team is they have no true big man outside of Witt, but Tavey's been there to step up.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with you, Brandon. I think it's Tavey, too. He just looks like a completely different player from last year. He looked like he came in last year, and he looked like he should be playing football. He should be lining up, in a Bronco jersey on Waldo Stadium for PJ Fleck. And now he kind of looks more like a basketball player. If he was 2-3 inches taller, you're talking about a guy that probably get higher, bigger conference scholarship offers. But, thankfully for Coach Hawkins, he is, 6'4", 6'5"?
6'5", yeah.
And taking advantage of him. We have first MAC game over. Huge win against Toledo. Still have, 16 games in MAC play?
17 more.
17 more. What do you guys see the rest of the way? How much should we read into this first game against Toledo? Is it just the product of the Broncos being at home where they seem to usually always play well? It was 11 out of 12 games against Toledo. They've now won at University Arena. Or is this team just that good?
What we have to first look at is the MAC East still looms. It's still the beast of the MAC when it comes to basketball. And when you have Ohio, Kent State, and Akron on the other side, and Buffalo's playing well, they have Javon McCray, who's the best player in the MAC, arguably, out of anyone.
Easily.
Yeah, easily.
At least I think so.
Yeah. So you have just a plethora of teams on the other side that you still have to go and play, some at home, some on the road. But the Broncos do seem to be playing better at home. Can they win on the road? Can they win at Toledo? Can they win at Central Michigan, Club Keno? Can they win on the road? I want to see if they can do that. Until then, I still think they're upper half team, 5-6 seed.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on board with what Brandon's saying. At the beginning of the season, I pegged them at maybe a 16 or 17 win team and winning, going about 500 in MAC play, which was at 9-9. Maybe they're 10-8. They might be a little bit better. I still really think Toledo's going to win the West, and I still think Eastern is probably better than a lot of people think they are, and I think they're going to get second. So I'm not going to change my prediction based on one game, but you got to hand it to them for coming out and being ready to take on a Toledo team that really nobody expected them to beat. So I'm going to stick with that and agree with Brandon that they're probably maybe a 6 or 7-ish seed in the MAC tournament.
All right, real quickly, Broncos travel to Oxford, Ohio, take on the Miami Redhawks this weekend on Saturday afternoon at 3 p.m. Does Western come away with a victory then, too?
This is a tough one for me because this is like your classic letdown game. I think they will win it, even though they've been haunted there in the past. That's a tough place to play, no matter how bad Miami might be. But I do think they squeak out a win. I think it's 5 points or so, something like that.
2 days to prepare for a Miami team that did just go up to Central Michigan and knock Chippewas off. But I do think that they get it out, maybe a squeaker of a game. I say Broncos by 2.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. Hey, this season has just been so exciting so far. My expectations weren't too high at the beginning of the year, but just watching them play more and more, I'm leaning towards you guys thinking 5-6 seed for the tournament. But anything can happen when you get to the MAC tournament. So we're gonna switch it up now. We're gonna get to Brandon's expertise here. But Western also has Miami of Ohio this weekend back here at Lawson Arena, and they have the Miami Redhawks too.
Dang, Oxford in the house.
Yeah, seriously. Miami ranked 13th right now in both of the polls. Brandon, tell us a little bit about this Miami team because I don't know anything about them.
Honestly.
Yeah, honestly.
The first thing that jumps out at you is their forwards. Riley Barber and Austin Zarnik are possibly the best 1-2 duo in all of college hockey. Take nothing away from St. Lawrence or anyone else, but what Zarnik's able to do with the puck and Barber's stick, I don't think you can see anything like it in college hockey right now. And Zarnik's been there ever since Riley Smith was there. He was Andy Mealy's replacement when Mealy won the Hobie Baker and then graduated. So he's just been a nice surprise ever since he's gotten there. Now he's a junior. He's really taken on the leadership role. And even though he's 5'9", he's fast, he's shifty, and he's strong. You got to really watch out for him, but he's very difficult to defend. And that'll be a big task for the Broncos this weekend. On defense, you can kind of see Matthew Cato carrying the D. And he's always been pretty solid back there, but their defense is known to be a little bit suspect. However, when you have Jay Williams and Ryan McKay in net, you can let a couple shots get through because they've been solid ever since they got into Oxford last season. And they replaced Cody Reichard and...
I think you're just making this up because if this was me, I don't know anything about college hockey. I'm not even.
Yeah, I know a little.
For all I know, you could just be making this entire thing up, and I would believe it because I don't know anything about Miami hockey.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about Miami is
this is why we brought him along because he's the hockey expert. You and I, we know just enough to get by, but Brandon's the one that's supposed to know everything here. So
and go.
They've been so solid ever since Enrico Blasi had got into Oxford and has changed the program around, turned it into the Brotherhood, and built them into a powerhouse. And they were about 4 minutes away from having a national championship in hockey before a classic, epic collapse against Boston University in 2010.
Well, the Broncos it'll be their first action after coming off, after winning the Great Lakes Invitational. Two impressive wins there, both of them in extra time. Do you see, and I know because I've gotten yelled at by Coach Murray numerous times for doing this because he hates the word momentum. But you know what? Coach Murray's not here right now. So you know what?
Momentum.
What's the other word he doesn't? Because there's three of them. It's momentum. Confidence, and we haven't figured out what the third one is yet.
Momentum.
Probably, yeah, just pounded it in there. But you know what? Because he's not here, do you see, because they have been struggling. They are last place in the new conference, with the GLI winning that, carrying over into 2014, and, hopefully getting some wins for the Broncos.
Well, I'm going to agree with Murray here and say there is no such thing as momentum. I will say that I think
he's not here.
I will say I think things are starting to really click with this young team. Keep in mind, I think they brought in 8 freshmen, so that they had a lot of young players come in and have to learn the program. We lost about 5 forwards, and then you lose Luke and Danny on D. That's pretty tough. And then you lose Garrett Haar as well in the offseason.
I don't know much about hockey, but I don't expect them to. I think the GLI was a little bit of a fluke here. Play in the NCHC. I know enough to know the NCHC is arguably one of the best conferences. Maybe not this year, but it's typically one of the best conferences. You go to the GLI, and I don't want to say it's a cream puff tournament, but it's almost become that from what the Broncos have played. And so, this was a nice feel-good in-state tournament win, but to say they're going to come back and just be like, ride all this M-word back, I don't really buy it. I'm not seeing it happening.
Well, Michigan was ranked 3rd, though, in the nation, and they beat them. I mean, that's got to say something.
I told you I didn't know anything about hockey, so...
We do know Michigan was missing a couple players. JT Comfer actually was gone from the team for a long time at the U.S. National Junior Team trials. He did join the team just a week or two before the tournament, so we don't know if that might have played into any kind of downfall because, let's face it, Red Berenson can recruit the hell out of the country. But still, this team is coming together. They did play solid defense, and then they got some nice close looks against Nagelvort. But as for this weekend, they have to plan for a different kind of attack. This Miami team is very talented, very fast, and if they can't shut down Zarnik or Barber, and they have to do it for 2 games, we could see a split or a sweep from the hands of the Redhawks.
All right, real quickly, I've always known for hockey that you ride the hot goalie. Frank Slabowski, I know I think he started every single game last year. He started, the first 10 or so games this year, and he was struggling, and they went to Hafner, and Hafner has been just incredible. Who should be in goal this weekend?
I think we should see a split between Slabowski and Hafner. Who starts first? I'm probably going to go with Hafner. Right now, if he were to qualify, he would be leading the nation in goals against average with 1.26. That's good over the likes of Sam Britton, Michael Garretig, and Nagelvort. So by a wide margin at that. He'd also be leading the nation in save percentage at 94.7%. Those are stellar numbers. Again, he needs more minutes, but still, as far as averages go, he did play Michigan. He did play Michigan Tech. He played Michigan State. So, those aren't pushovers. And you say what you will about State and Tech, but holding Michigan to 2 goals, he's just been really nice and red hot. However, Slabowski is still the man. He still has it, and we just have to see if this defense can hold in front of him. I think we see both goalies this weekend.
Well, and again, I've repeatedly said that how little I follow college hockey, and that's no secret. But I grew up a Red Wings fan, and I am totally with Colin on this bandwagon here that you ride the hot goalie. And the little that I do know, Hafner's been hot. So to me, you almost have to start Hafner in that Friday night at least and see how he does.
Couldn't agree more with you, Persky. All right, well, we're going to jump now to the Lions. We're now in, week 2 of searching for the new head coach. And Brandon over here, he is so pumped about the Lions. He loves the Lions.
Biggest Lions fan in this room.
Oh, totally.
Totally loves the Lions. But like I said, we're still looking for the coach. A few interviews for different candidates. Who do you guys want to see as the coach?
Do we have to talk about the Lions?
We have to. We got to touch on them. I mean,
okay.
You're wearing a Lion's head.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I am.
Come on.
Oh, crap.
It's okay.
when this search started, one of the first people that I wanted to see was Ken Wisenhunt, and I know that sounds a little crazy, but there's really not that much out there considering. There's a reason why these guys are unemployed and looking for jobs, to be quite honest, But if I had to pick one person, Ken Wisenhunt was up there, Bill Cowher was up there, but he's not coming out of TV to coach the Lions. I wouldn't if I was him. And then Jim Caldwell was another guy that I thought was up there. But those are the two guys that I'd like to see out of what's left. I'm leaning towards them doing Wisenhunt. It just makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, I think it's going to end up being Wisenhunt. I really kind of like the Jay Gruden at first. I like that as an option, but he just got introduced today as the new Washington Redskins head coach. So
yeah, they can have him.
Yeah, X his name out. Really?
I'm not a big Jay Gruden fan. Just something about him, too young. I don't know if he's that experienced. He kind of reminds me of like Lane Kiffin or something to me. I don't know.
Ugh, last thing I want here in Detroit is a Lane Kiffin.
He's in the Mike Munchak category. I'm not a big Munchak fan either. If they hire another Tennessee coach, my God, what have they learned? But it would be the Lions.
All right, Mr. Colts fan here. Who do you want as the Lions coach?
I would say Caldwell, but his track record isn't that great. He's been to a Super Bowl, but he's also been to a 2-14 season. But
that was not that 2-14.
That was with Curtis Painter at quarterback, and I mean, Curtis Painter's Curtis Painter.
Getting some snaps that year too.
I don't know. That's a bad season, but we put that in our memories because it was suck for luck. So
I think Tim Hiller got snaps that year. Actually.
No, not quite.
All right, well, Brandon, just because we love you, we will talk a little NFL playoffs for this weekend. Got a couple great matchups. Your Colts will be at New England. San Diego is at Denver. AFC, take off your homer cap. Who's going to come out of the AFC?
The entire AFC?
The entire AFC.
Can't say the Colts.
I could say the Colts.
You could say the Colts, but
breaking it down game by game, you look at the Colts, Patriots. I'll save that for later. Chargers, Broncos. I don't know what the hell's going on in San Diego. Philip Rivers is playing out of his mind.
Offensive coordinator's a bomb.
I still think Peyton Manning with a week to rest in Denver and all of his offensive weapons, they could just get it done. I know San Diego did go into Denver in Week 15, pulled out a win, and then sparked their road to the playoffs. And San Diego does have the Philadelphia Eagles reverse curse, whatever you want to call it, on their side as well, home opener. But I think the Broncos win that game, and so they'll host the AFC Championship. On the other side, if Andrew Luck doesn't completely suck in the first half like he has every game this season, it seems like, the Colts have a decent chance to beat Tom Brady and the Patriots in Foxborough. Brady hasn't been as stellar in recent years than he was at the first half of his career, and he doesn't have the offensive weapons he used to, and he doesn't have the defense that he used to. When Chris Jones is one of your starting D tackles with 11 games, undrafted free agent from Bowling Green, it's hard to say that you're going to have a stellar defense go up against the Colts. And they don't have much offensively either, but Donald Brown and T.Y. Hilton are two very solid players when need be.
Yeah. There's the homer. There's the homer cap. You just put it on.
You can't deny T.Y. Hilton has talent. Am I wrong?
He has two letters for his first name, so he must be talented at something.
Right, and he has his little TY dance that he does too at the end.
I gotta say, my dream matchup for the AFC and the NFC would be like a Seattle-San Francisco matchup in the NFC, and then a Peyton Manning versus Tom Brady matchup in the AFC. Honestly, this is hard for me to say, but I actually think Carolina is like my little sleeper in the playoffs, and I could actually see them making the Super Bowl just because their defense is so freaking good.
See,
Seattle's awesome too.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree with you there because I think the Giants, San Francisco Giants,
San
Francisco 49ers, that game against Green Bay, if Colin Kaepernick can play the way that he did, where he's not only moving the ball with his arm but also moving it with his legs, that's when he's the most valuable, when he is versatile like that. And it's so hard to be able to stop that zone read when it's on. I know Carolina's got one of the better defenses in the NFL.
Riverboat Ron.
Yeah, but it's just, I don't know. I've never been a Cam Newton fan, and I don't want to just.
Me neither.
I'm sorry. If you have to dumb down the playbook for someone when you're in college and now you go to the NFL, pure athleticism is what gets him by.
Defense travels. Yeah. The 49ers have a great defense too, so it'll be interesting. But there's like one. It was either a Sunday night game or a Monday night game that I cannot get out of my head, and it was the New England Carolina game where like Cam Newton just like out of nowhere led them down the field. Their defense was amazing. Their defense has been incredible all year. They probably have the best linebacker in the NFL that no one's ever heard of. But what's that?
Luke Kuechly?
Yes, he's the man. But man, I really like this Carolina team for some reason. And out of all the teams, they're the only team that I could see going into Seattle and actually winning. So that's for some reason I really like them. And Peyton Manning, obviously, that's going to be hard to beat them.
All right, real quickly, is there any chance New Orleans can go into Seattle and beat them in Seattle and the 12th man?
No,
not
happening.
All right, I think we're all in agreement with that. I want to jump topics again. Yesterday it was announced Tom Glavine, Greg Maddux, and Frank Thomas all introduced to the Baseball Hall of Fame. No controversy with any three of those guys. We all know how great they were. Greg Maddux, easily probably one of the best 5 pitchers, 10 pitchers, right-handed pitchers that we've seen. Glavine, an underrated lefty whose stats don't even tell you how great of a 1-2 punch when they had John Smoltz and Steve Avery too. One of the best rotations ever. Frank Thomas, years of playing against the Tigers, I always hated him, but respected the hell out of him. But man, every time,
He's a baller.
I remember there was one game. I think like the White Sox hit something like 7 or 8 home runs at Tiger Stadium, and Thomas hit 2 of them. And I'll never forget that. But
He was just a monster at the plate when he got up there.
with the Hall of Fame, I know obviously there's a lot of controversy with it. A couple names that did not get in: Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds. Would you guys vote for those two if you had a vote to the Hall of Fame?
The Hall of Fame has gotten extremely boring to me. Like, I've put so little interest into it the last few years that I don't even care who goes in anymore because it's just boring to me, to be quite honest. But for me, it's like, how can you leave guys like Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds out of the Hall of Fame? Like, I don't care if they cheated by using steroids or what it was. Like, you still had to be a heck of a baseball player to hit as many home runs, to have the hand-eye coordination that Barry Bonds had, and the amount of strikeouts that Roger Clemens had. I mean, to me, those guys deserve to be voted in. Maybe they get arrested and they're in jail, but they still deserve to be called one of the best baseball players of all time because they were very good at the sport of baseball. So I'm just not into the Hall of Fame voting anymore. I just think it's kind of lost its flavor a little bit. But that's just...
As hitters, I really can't see it, especially since you see players like Ted Williams with great hand-eye coordination not hit a lot of home runs. Ty Cobb with a great batting average not hit a lot of home runs.
Yeah, Ty Cobb played when the outfield walls were 460 feet.
Obviously, we're talking 2 completely different times, but Mickey Mantle, great hitter, great power. But for me to say Bonds, when you see what he was in Pittsburgh, just this little twig, and then goes out to San Francisco and looks like the Hulk.
Natural.
Yeah, it's not natural. As for Clemens, it almost seemed like he looked the same throughout. He aged a little bit more naturally. So I am a little bit skeptical about his use of steroids, and I'd be more inclined to vote for him. He was a dominant pitcher, and you do go out once every 5 days rather than play every day, and you're smashing the cover off the ball into McCovey Cove, or in St. Louis or Chicago. Obviously, I'm a Cubs fan, and I'll admit it, but I wouldn't vote for Sammy Sosa, even though he's the only player to hit 60 or more home runs in 3 straight seasons. Nobody's ever done that. I don't think anyone ever will for some time. But I want to give him a vote. You see what happened to him after he left the game. He turned into the ghost. And
I guess my one argument that I would make for any hitter is, and maybe I'm wrong about this, you can just tell me I'm a complete moron, but steroids don't affect your hand-eye coordination. And to me, you still have to hit the ball pretty good. It may not go over the fence 9 times out of 10. Maybe it'll go over the fence 6 or 7 times out of 10. But to me, if you're a good hitter, you're a good hitter. And to rob guys like Sammy Sosa, who clearly did steroids, and Barry Bonds.
And corked his bat.
Yeah. And Pudge, if you want to talk about steroids, I guess. Pudge maybe got robbed too, but maybe he'll still get elected in. But to me, it's like just impressive that they can still... I think Barry Bonds was still a pretty good hitter. He may not have hit as many home runs as he did in the Pittsburgh Pirate days, but it's tough for me to rob those guys after they did have great careers, regardless of what they did, I guess. It's a hard topic to weigh in on, I guess.
It really is, and we seen Dan Le Batard even give up his vote, and he let a website decide on who
Deadspin. He sold his rights to Deadspin.
Well, they actually
keep the money, and he lost his vote today.
Yeah, I was about to say they just took his vote away. But I'm actually on the opposite side of you, Brandon. I think Barry Bonds should be in because I look at his numbers. You look before 1999. Right there, if you ended his career right there, he's still a Hall of Famer. In my opinion, he was a Hall of Famer. So if you want to look at steroids, if you're going to criticize him for the potential steroid use, take out 2009. If you can sit there and say from 1999 to when he was a rookie, 89. If you can look at that and you can legitimately think that you all right over there?
I just spilled stuff all over my pants.
Oh, good job, buddy. Good job. Man, making me lose my train of thought here.
That was my whole purpose.
Right.
I'm just trying to throw you off.
Right.
I spilled everywhere.
But anyways, Barry Bonds in based on everything before the steroids. And the reason why I say no on Clemens, and I'm actually going to steal this from Colin Cowherd, who I heard him talk about this today. But Roger Clemens, his last 4 years in Boston before he got traded to Toronto, which when he was in Toronto, it's when he hooked up with Jose Canseco, and that's when all the talk of the steroids, that's when he started it. He was a under 500 pitcher. His ERA was the highest in those 4 years out of any other 4 years of his career. He was a fading pitcher. And then all of a sudden, boom, he goes to Toronto, and his career is revived. How often do you see in any sport where someone I forget how old he was, but he was,
35 or something.
Yeah, I mean, he was in his, mid to early 30s by the time he got to Toronto. How often do you see a player who has struggles for 4 years, and then all of a sudden, boom, their career is rejuvenated? I think that alone right there is my reason why I'm not voting Clemens in there.
But I mean, you see Kenny Rogers go to Detroit, and he had a couple good years after he seemed to.
Yeah, the one good year, 06.
But still, I mean, it's not uncommon to see pitchers kind of come back into their own.
But not that consistently, though.
With a change of repertoire in pitches and just a little bit of help from different coaches. Obviously, Canseco is there, and say what you will.
Are you calling him a coach?
Not coach, but
Steroid user.
Canseco is Canseco, and we know what Canseco
Steroid
did.
supplier.
Yeah, that's true. Steroid writer.
So I mean that is there, but even after he left, he was still dominant for years. In New York and Houston. And I don't honestly think that someone would keep doing steroids into their 40s when they still have they have a vast amount of wealth already accumulated throughout their career. When you get to that point in your life, it just seems like it becomes more family oriented and not as much professionalism. And he was still 40, 42 in 18, 20 win seasons in Houston.
All I know is I think the Hall of Fame is just a mess. The fact that there are voters who wrote for 10 years and then don't even cover baseball anymore still get a vote. I know the big argument is Vince Scully, Hall of Fame broadcaster. He doesn't have a vote. There's just something wrong with that system. It needs to be tweaked. It needs to be worked out. They need to figure it out because, as you said, Persky, it is kind of boring. And the fact that we still have this cloud over it, like who used, who didn't. It's a mess right now. I don't know how to fix it. I'm not smart enough. So I don't know.
To me, it's like when you have the Heisman voting, it's pretty clear how that process works, and the fans get into it, and it's exciting, and it builds up to bowl season. Like, there's nothing to the Hall of Fame that gets me excited anymore at all. I don't even know, you don't even know who gets nominated. It's kind of a couple days later you hear about it. You don't know who had a chance and who didn't, or why they got voted in, or who voted, or the process, or anything. Like, it's just kind of a dry process to me. So, yeah, I agree.
The fact that Babe Ruth wasn't a unanimous Hall of Fame, Hall of Fame selection, or Honus Wagner, or Ty Cobb, any player in the history of baseball, no one's been a unanimous selection. The fact that is a fact in itself. All the players that have played baseball, you can't tell me that Ted Williams wasn't a, unanimous selection, his great career. It's hard for me to say that process is not horribly broken. Not just broken, but horribly broken. When in the history of baseball, no one's been a unanimous selection to the Hall of Fame with all of their great players.
Well, one voting process that I do know is not flawed. The NFL had a vote from all the players on the most feared players in the NFL. I'm going to go backwards on here. Number 5 was Peyton Manning. Obviously, I think their definition of fear is...
mental fear.
Yeah. Number 4...
The least scary person.
Right. Number 4, Patrick Willis, who...
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be having nightmares if I was an offensive player going against him. Same thing with number 3, J.J. Watt.
Okay.
But number 2 was Megatron.
Really? He's like the nicest guy in the world from what I've heard.
Right. Well, I think that kind of goes in the same thing as the Peyton Manning. I don't know necessarily if they fear him as, like, they're intimidated by him, like they think he's going to, like, just beat him up or anything like that, but I think it's the fear of going against him.
Because he's a monster.
Yeah.
He's a huge wide receiver. I could see that.
Whenever you have a threat to go for 300 yards receiving in a game, and you stand 6'5", 6'6", like, Johnson does, that is a little bit imposing on defenses as a whole. How do you stop this guy? Because, there is nobody else for the Lions. Calvin Johnson, and then a somewhat fledgling run game. He can do anything, and he is the only weapon on that offense.
Number 1 on the list, another Lion, Dominican Sue.
Not surprising.
I was about to say, do you guys agree with that? I mean, I've interviewed him before, and I stood next to him, and I'm about 5'9", 175 on a good day. And, I mean, he's twice the size of me. I mean, I had my camera, and I was interviewing him, and I was looking up. I mean, just a beast, ferocious. Nicest guy off the field. But, I mean, we've heard from numerous players, in interviews that talk about, the dirtiness of him. I wonder if that factors in to being the fear, or if he really just is that dominant, and people really are that fearful of going against him.
It's got to be a combination of both. He is... I think he's been less dirty the last year or so. Maybe that's a tainted Lions fan opinion. But the first couple of years he came in the league, he really made a statement and put that fear factor into people, which to me was great because the Lions have never had anybody besides maybe Barry Sanders, who was, like a Peyton Manning, Calvin Johnson, mentally feared opponent. But they never had this nasty feared opponent. And Dominican Sue came in and was just a badass. Like, he just came in and wrecked it. So there, I think it's a little bit of that, but I also do think there is some skill there, and he dominates, nose tackle, or not nose tackles, he isn't nose tackle, but he dominates offensive linemen and throws quarterbacks. All his pictures and GIFs and videos that you see of him just tearing quarterbacks up, even if it is a late hit, it's still scary.
You ever play Super Punch-Out for the Super Nintendo?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I forgot his first name, but Bull, the big Bull. That's what Sue reminds me of.
One of the last levels.
Big upper body, yeah, big upper body, strong, and he'll, he's very powerful, and the dirty factor does come into play. He's so intimidating from a stand, just before he even gets into his stance. When you have to account from every play, and he's right there in the middle of the action every time, and he's so quick, he's easily one of the most feared defenders because he's in on every play, unlike a linebacker or a cornerback, or he's on the line. He's going after a quarterback or he's going after the running back.
Couple more topics. We're going to do these real quickly. One team that didn't put a lot of fear into opponents this year was the Michigan offense. Yesterday they made the change. Al Borges out. Don't do that. I know how excited you are about this.
He was awful.
Yeah, but is it Neusmeyer? Is that how you pronounce it?
I was hoping you'd know because I don't know.
Yeah,
how to
I
pronounce
was.
it.
Yeah, I think it's Neusmeyer.
Sounds right.
Sounds right. All right. Nussmeier. Michigan's offensive coordinator. Do you like the move? Should it have been done sooner?
I think it should have been done sooner, but I never thought it would happen, to be honest, because they're buddies. Hoke and Borges, they've been buddies forever. So I was actually a little surprised when I saw this news, even though it was quite obvious the last couple of years that Al Borges is the most vanilla, predictable, terrible offensive coordinator. The only reason he's gotten away with it all these years, I think, is because they've recruited well at San Diego State, they recruited well at Ball State. Now you're in the big leagues, in the Big Ten, playing against good competition. You can't get away with crappy play calling like he has had all these years, and he's finally kind of been exposed to, they've been used to having better athletes. Well, they don't have better athletes anymore. So, I think this was definitely a necessary change, and it's almost a home run hire in my opinion. I don't know how you can do better than the hire that they just did, to be quite honest. Just the name recognition alone, that Neusmeyer, or however you pronounce it, he comes from Alabama as an offensive coordinator. You're going to tell a recruit that you just pulled in an offensive coordinator from Alabama. I think that's a home run hire for them, and they should have done this sooner.
Couple things there. Saying you got the Alabama offensive coordinator, it's all right. It's a nice pro-style offense, and I'll get to that point in a minute. But I just don't see it as a home run recruiting tactic. The fact that they made the change from a spread offense that they got to run with Nate Davis at Ball State, with Devin Gardner and Denard Robinson at Michigan.
I agree with that.
You can keep them around, but when you see Shane Morris come in and he looks more pro-style than anything, when you go to Neusmeyer's pro-style offense, that's what it looks like the change might be made to. Obviously, getting him and having one of the better pro-style offenses in the SEC is nice to have, but the offense is going to have to be predicated around strong running backs, which is what Alabama's had for the past 4 or 5 years.
And he did come into Michigan, to give a little bit of slack off of Borges, he comes into Michigan with Rich Rod's recruits. He was kind of set up to fail, but, to counter that, there's just no creativity. After a certain while, when you're on the hot seat and things are getting heated, you got to switch it up. And, I thought the best game he called all year was the Ohio State game. And I don't know where that's been all year. Why all of a sudden, you're fighting for a bowl game, basically, fighting for your life. And, okay, finally you called a good game, threw some nice screen passes, short plays, reverses, mixed it up and everything. But then you go back to the Kansas State game, and they started out well in the first quarter. I thought Shane Morris, they put him in position to win. And then it's like he just went back to it and became predictable and vanilla again. And so I just think the unpredictableness of Borges and the inconsistent, well, actually, it was consistently vanilla, I feel like. It's nice to just get somebody new in there. And like you said, Alabama runs a great pro-style offense, and it should be a good fit. But it's pretty extremely frustrating to watch, how bad the play calling was, I think.
I love the move. I also love all the hate that Al Borges is getting on social media because a year ago, 2 years ago, it was like, oh my God, we were so happy. And it's funny. I find sports fans funny because you love a coach when they do well, and then the second there's a little hiccup in what's supposed to be going on, everyone's jumping ship. And it just seems like that's how everyone was. Everyone's like, oh my God, so glad Borges is out. But 2 years ago, you were all loving him. So Johnny Manziel declared for NFL draft. A lot of experts projecting him as a top 5 pick. Would you take him as a top 5 pick? Yes or no?
No.
Absolutely not.
Couldn't agree with you two more.
I can't believe, did we not see what happened to Tim Tebow? I mean, they're not exactly the same, but speed does not win in the NFL. It rarely wins in the NFL. Guys on defense are way too fast to get fooled by that. So I can't see it.
I'm just waiting for someone to, in the NFL especially, to hit Manziel and just knock him out of a career because I don't think he's ever really been hit hard. I think you saw it a little bit during the LSU game. Maybe it was Mississippi State. I can't remember who, but he hurt his shoulder pretty bad, and it wasn't that hard of a hit. So now you're having stronger, faster guys in the NFL come at you. I just don't see Manziel that great of a quarterback, and maybe being a product of the Texas A&M system, especially with Kevin Sumlin, seeing what he did in Houston. When you turn players like
I know who you're thinking of.
Yeah, but when you turn
Keenum,
Case Keenum into a star, and he's still doing it in Texas, I think. When you have a nice air raid attack, you're going to have nice stats. Is he a product of that offense and having decent legs? Probably.
Pistons have lost 6 in a row and are now on the outside looking in as the number 9 seed in the Eastern Conference. I am all about tanking this season. I do not want the Pistons to be a 7 or 8 seed and get swept in the first round. Are you guys down for rigging for Wiggins?
I'm going to say no, actually, because the Pistons have struggled lately. I would like
Lately?
to see, I would like to see them make the playoffs. And how bad the East is, just please make the playoffs. Like, all you got to do is get in. You're going to, I mean, the bad part is you may play the Pacers in the first round if you squeak in.
And if you're lucky, you might play Miami.
Yeah, and if you're really lucky. Personally, I would like to see them get in. They have some young pieces. It's been pretty inconsistent, but, man, I would love to see them back in the playoffs.
I really don't think you can tank this early into the season, especially when you are competing for a 7 seed. And it's not entirely unthinkable to think Pistons might make it to the 5 seed and draw the Atlantic champion in the first round, which is a winnable game. Then you get to the second round. Obviously, you probably got the Pacers, but they're their division opponent. You never know what might happen. Obviously, we're not going to say they win a series, but if they can compete, they have decent pieces. I'm not going to lie. If they can finally click and come together, that's not a bad team. They could be competitive. I don't think you can tank this early on. Obviously, if things keep going bad, it's a lot easier, but the East is awful. It's going to continue to be awful. You can compete for the playoffs and compete for a lottery pick at the same time. So I think you got to play for the playoffs and just get more money because you'll still get that pick regardless.
I just looked at the standings, and I cannot believe that the 3rd seed is 2 games above 500. That's how bad the East is.
You saw the standings pulled up?
Yes.
How many teams from the West right now would make the playoffs if they were in the Eastern Conference? Or let me rephrase that. How many teams in the West wouldn't make the playoffs if they were in the Eastern Conference? I think it's only like 2 or 3.
I think we had this discussion.
Utah and Sacramento?
Yes, and the Lakers are on the cusp.
Yeah.
I think we had this discussion over at Hustlebelt the other day where the Atlanta Hawks are the 3 seed in the East, but they want to make the playoffs in the West, which,
You're absolutely correct.
Well, neither would the Atlantic Division champion. I don't know. I look at it this way. I think the Pistons are still one piece away. And the thing with Detroit is you're not going to draw a huge free agent. It's very hard for Detroit to pull in a free agent. When they do, they have to overpay. The easiest way in the NBA to build a championship team is through the draft. This is going to be the best draft since 2003. And also remember this too. If the Pistons pick is outside the top 8, it goes to the Charlotte Hornets, which they will be next year. It goes to them.
That's awesome that they're going to be the Hornets.
I love it too. Just tank. I think it's better for the team to get another top pick, especially, I mean, they got to eventually win the lotto or something, get one of those top 3 picks. You add a Julius Randle, a Wiggins, Jabari Parker to that lineup with Drummond, Monroe, Smith, Caldwell Pope, Brandon Jennings, Singler, all these guys. I'm telling you. And hey, and we'll have no Charlie V next year too. Rodney Stuckey will probably be gone too.
No, Charlie V is the most encouraging.
Yeah.
I got 2 words for you. Darko Milicic.
You son of a...
And yes, and you know what?
Carmelo Anthony? No.
Carmelo Anthony, D. Wade. The
I
rest of that 2003 draft.
I will say
Darko Milicic.
I will say this because I was one of the people that said Darko over Carmelo. I'm not afraid to admit it. I wanted Darko. But in Joe Dumars' defense, Denver's GM at the time also said that if they had the second pick, they would have taken Darko over Melo, and they weren't the only team that said that. And this was before the draft, before everyone knew of how horrible Darko was.
He's pretty horrible.
But that's my point. You can think Darko was the player. He had all of the assets. He had,
He was a workout warrior.
Yeah, he was that, the typical gym rat, quote unquote. What if one of these players turns out to be like that? What if Jabari Parker, consensus number 2 pick right now? What if he's kind of struggled in his past couple games at Duke? He's not shooting the ball well. He surprisingly got dunked on by Pat Connaughton, which surprises me. I'm not going to say Connaughton's not unathletic, but he's not Jabari Parker. What if he's a flop? What if it's just so hard to build in the draft and say this is going to work out for sure? Obviously, LeBron James worked out. Carmelo's kind of worked out. He's got the skills, not the attitude. Dwayne Wade's worked out. Andrew Wiggins, or they're the next Darko Milicic, where the Pistons see a player, they like him, they go after him, but he just doesn't turn into anything.
I think I've seen enough from these guys so far through their first half of the college season or whatever, that there's enough evidence on the court to say that these guys aren't going to be a Darko Milicic. Do I know that for sure? No. Obviously, we have no idea. But it's safe to say that any of those guys will not be a Darko Milicic.
Jabari Parker's my guy. I think that's who I'd want.
And that's exactly who I want too. Because not only is and you talk about attitude, Parker's one of these guys who, he's just raved about for how great of a teammate he is, his work ethic.
He must be smart too.
Yeah, he goes to Duke. Hey, it was smart that he picked Duke over Michigan State.
Buzzing.
Yeah.
Notre Dame fans.
I know.
However, Duke's pulling in, I think, the number 1 and number 4 recruits in next year's recruiting class. What if Parker stays? What if Parker decides? I know it's a huge hypothetical, but what if he does? If he's such a great teammate and he wants to win championships,
NBA championships.
Who better to stay in the college level than Coach K? Who better to learn from than somebody who has 2 gold medals and got LeBron, Carmelo, Dwayne Wade, Chris Paul, the NBA's best American players to gel and dominate the Olympics? Who better to learn how to be a better player than Coach K?
We're better to learn than to play in the NBA. I know what you're saying, and trust me, I'm a Duke fan. I love Coach K. If I had a son that was being recruited, and if Duke's name was even mentioned, that team name was even mentioned, my kid would be going there. Maybe after Michigan. He'd go to Michigan first and then Duke second. And that's just the homer in me coming out on that. But yeah. All right, last topic, and then we're going to wrap it up here. Penn State hired a new head coach, Franklin, from Vanderbilt. It's been, 2 years now since all the Joe Pa scandal happened?
Since the shower.
Sorry.
So awful.
Oh, so awful. But
couldn't help it, sorry.
If you were a coach and you were offered the job at Penn State, with everything still looming there, would you take on the responsibility of being a coach there?
Me, I would probably say no, but that's why I don't coach college football. But James Franklin, that's a home run hire, in my opinion. That's a great hire. If anyone can bring a program sort of to that next level, Bill O'Brien did a heck of a job just keeping them afloat. But if anybody can sort of take them over the hump now and get them back to where they were, I mean, this guy can recruit. I'm a big on recruiting, obviously. James Franklin is one of the best recruiters out there. Kids love playing for him. If you can get Vanderbilt into a consistent 8 and 9 win team, then you're doing something right. And so that's a great hire. I know he has some background in the Pennsylvania area, so he's going to recruit well. He's got huge ties to Chicago. They're gonna do well. He's gonna do really well at Penn State, no doubt in my mind.
I agree with Brian here. Bill O'Brien's doing a great job keeping Penn State afloat, and he deserves all the credit in the world, and I don't think deserves any shtick for heading to Houston. He was an NFL coordinator. He's probably an NFL coach, and he kept Penn State going in, I think, a pair of 8-4 seasons when that program was at its lowest. 4-year postseason ban, major scholarship loss. They're still competitive. James Franklin comes in, having turned around Vanderbilt, like Brian said, which is no easy task in itself, and he inherits just 2 years of that postseason ban. After those 2 years, Penn State could be back to national power, and that's still not a bad place to play. You still play in front of 110,000 fans that are rabid. They love their football in Happy Valley. You still have a nice cushion where you're by Ohio, where you're by New York, where and then you come from the SEC, so you have ties to the South. He'll be a great hire. For me personally, I would, if I was in Franklin's position, I'd take the job in a heartbeat. With having gone through half of that postseason ban already gone, having that solid fan base that will still show up even in these dark times, and having such a historical program that you can say, hey, we have all this. It may have been Joe Paterno. I still think Paterno's mostly clean from the situation. Obviously, that's debatable for other things, but still, you can't deny what he's done in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And even, when the scandal was going on, he, in his last couple seasons, brought Penn State back into the limelight, getting them to an Orange Bowl and, keeping them in the BCS.
Yeah, I have something to add to that, too, by the way. There was an article that I read. I forget what it was. It was the sister company of MLive. They wrote it in the Pittsburgh area. There was a writer that that wrote when Joe Pa was there for 10 years, and he got to know Bill O'Brien really well. And the article was fascinating, quite honestly. And it basically made it seem like the people in State College, Pennsylvania, they were totally attached to Joe Paterno. There was a huge, which is understandable, he built the program from nothing. Very, very loyal and attached. Didn't want anyone, no matter who it was, to come in and coach. They still wanted Joe Paterno, and they had a chip on their shoulder. Bill O'Brien came in and did what most outsiders would say was an amazing job. These people basically tried running him out of town, and it was very clear in this article from all the different testimonials and all the evidence that the guy had. It was just very fascinating, and you almost don't blame O'Brien for sort of throwing his hands up in the air and saying, all right, I'll just go to the NFL and coach. And I think James Franklin has made it known in a few different areas that this is kind of a destination job for him. And so I think already the fans and some of these other donors and alumni are going to be on his side, and I think he will be successful there. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. This article pointed out O'Brien as sort of a bad guy, and I never, ever pictured him to be like that. So
My brother is a huge Penn State fan. He has since I can, from as little as he's been, I can always remember that he was always a huge Penn State fan. And one of the reasons was Joe Paterno. Pretty much the only reason why was Joe Paterno. He respected the man as a coach that much, and he said if he ever played college football, which he didn't. He said he would have played at Penn State in a heartbeat. And he made a great point right before Paterno died. Joe Paterno needed Penn State more than Penn State needed Joe Paterno. His heart was in it so much that the second they cut ties with him, it was a month afterwards that he passed away?
Yeah, weeks.
That is kind of crazy, yeah.
And that just goes to show you how much he loved that university. Penn State is going to be back to a national powerhouse rather quickly. You think about the guys that Franklin can bring in now. You tell them, hey, look, 2 years we're not going to be in a bowl game. We're not going to play in the Big Ten championship. But when you are an upperclassman, that'll be your first crack at going at the Big Ten championship and getting us back into a bowl game. I look at it this way too. If let's just say this happened in Michigan, and if I was a high school football player and Michigan was looking at me and they had all these sanctions, how badly would you want to be one of those guys that when this bowl ban was over, you can say you were part of that team that helped bring it back around? And Penn State, as we said, is such a big national powerhouse, and there's fans all across the country that love Penn State. You'll see that the people that like Penn State, that were growing up, they will come to Penn State.
It's a great recruiting tool, and I'm sure Franklin's going to use that.
And don't forget who Penn State has in their division, Ohio State.
and Michigan State. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up. I told you at the beginning I was going to give you guys a couple seconds to put in your plugs. Give us your Twitters, give you your websites, throw it all in there. Now.
All right, I've got at Brian Persky and at WMU Rivals. Those are the two Twitter handles. If you go to our website, it's westernmichigan.rivals.com or just broncoblitz.com. We've got everything. We cover mostly Western Michigan, but primarily recruiting. So any of the latest basketball or football recruiting news, that's your spot. Now Brandon's going to trump me and have some ridiculous opening line.
Brandon Fitzsimons.
He went second on purpose. He gave me the nod.
I saw him do that.
And he was like, you go first because I'm just going to knock this out of the park. So we'll see if I have to jump back in here and reclaim something.
Hustle Belt, easily the best Mac-centric blog on the interwebs, in the universe, whatever you want to say.
Agreed.
Founded by Matt Sussman, still loyal founder, funniest guy on Twitter. Now we're led by Brian M. Vance, great guy, great Ohio alum, living in his parents' basement for now. Hashtag journalist problems. Hustlebelt.com is the website. Follow it. Obviously, we're covering everything. Men's basketball, women's basketball, football, volleyball, hockey, gymnastics even.
Wow.
Yeah, that was fun.
Women's or men's?
Women's. There's no men's.
Couldn't pay more
At
than
Hustle
men's
Belt.
gymnastics.
At Hustlebelt is the Twitter. Mine is at Bronco Fitz, Fitz, all one word. And like I said, if you want to follow some of our more funnier writers, you can find them under my followers: Alex Alvarado, Brian Vance is at Brian M. Vance, and then Matt Sussman is Suss, the number 2 hyphens. So give them a follow. They're great people to follow. Like I said, Sussman's possibly one of the funniest guys I know. All your Mac coverage is through us.
Is that it?
Yeah.
You done?
Wait, there's one more thing. Hashtag Maction.
Maction, Max the ball, Maki.
Anyways, thanks for having us on.
All right, and I'm Colin
Yeah.
Windecker. I have Twitter. I barely use it. I'm the most inconsistent Twitter person in the world. So I'm not even going to give you mine because you don't want to follow me.
See Windecker.
See Windecker if you want to, but I'm so inconsistent on it. So, all right, well, that's gonna wrap it up, guys. I want to thank you for thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having.
Oh, jinx.
All right, well, hopefully we can do this again, and that's a wrap.